You talk to those concerned. Can you rule out any Arab links?
په افغانستان کې عربي اتباع یا بعض داسې ګروپونه چې د افغان دنیا خطر احساسوي تاسو د هغو لاس درلودنه په دې پیښه کې هم ردوئ؟
زه فکر کوم چې دا پیښه ډېره لویه پیښه ده او دا به داسې چا پسې منسوبول چې زړه ته مو ونه لوېږي چې دا کار وکړي. دا به کېدای شي چې یو ناانصافي وي، یو څوم تخمین ونه وي.
It is a very big and enormous incident. So just to connect it with some people that even one's logic cannot even accept it. So in my opinion, it might not be a justifying.
Mr. Major, are you surprised that the United States has received this sort of attack?
د امریکا متحده ایالاتو چې د داسې حملاتو هدف وګرځېد، تاسو په دې باندې حیران شوي یاستئ؟
د دې خبر ده چې د خپل نوې دا پیښه کېدای شي د امریکا په تاریخ کې ډېره لویه پیښه وي. د هر چا لپاره طبیعي خبر د حیرانۍ وړ ده.
Naturally, because this might be the only and the unique kind of incident in the history of the United States. So, like anyone is also.
What I'm getting at is do you think the United States has perhaps invited this, given its policies around the world and the growing resentment that some forces feel towards the United States? So what I'm suggesting is that the United States is
the Taliban official in Kabul. The relevance here, of course, is that the United States government has blamed the Afghani government for harboring Osama bin Laden, who may or may not be responsible for the events that have happened here in the country today, and therefore the Taliban response. The president, who was in Sarasota, Florida, when President Bush, when the first attack on the Trade Center took place, issued a statement then. He left Sarasota. He is not going back to the White House, at least not yet, but he has told reporters, quote, "We have taken all appropriate security precautions to protect the American people. Make no mistake," said the president, "the United States will hunt down and punish those responsible for these cowardly acts." The president said the U.S. military has been put on a high alert status and said he had taken security precautions to ensure the government continues to function. And as we said, the president at this moment is not going back to Washington. He has been taken elsewhere for his own safety. There is no reason, by the way, at this point to believe there are continuing threats, but that doesn't mean there aren't any, and the Secret Service is taking no chances, and we can't recall anything even approaching that. We also have a report coming out of London from the Associated Press that followers of Osama bin Laden had warned 3 weeks ago that they would carry out a huge and unprecedented attack on U.S. interests. That according to a London-based Arab journalist. He adds, they said it would be huge and unprecedented, but did not specify what it was, and we will not assume that this is what it was, but obviously a lot of people are wondering. Joining us on the phone, Richard Holbrooke, former American ambassador to the United Nations, Robert Gates, former head of the CIA, and they join us. Mr. Gates, let me start with you because I suspect that millions of Americans right now are asking, how could something like this happen? How could it happen?
I think that we have to start by acknowledging that we've been both fortunate and capable in the past. This is not the first major attack like this that has been planned. Several years ago, there was a plot to bring down 11 American jumbo jets in Asia that the FBI and U.S. intelligence thwarted, and there have been some other major attacks. So I think that when you have a free and open country as we do, we are vulnerable to this sort of thing, and it is the face of this term that people have been talking about for several years of asymmetric warfare, and it is a way of getting at us, the most powerful military nation in the world, in ways in which we're vulnerable.
Sir, we heard, and perhaps it's given our proximity to the events, it's a little bit unseemly, but we heard a member of Congress but a few minutes ago essentially say that the American government failed its people. Is it fair to say that this is a failure, or we just can't we can't know it all?
Well, personally, I believe that for people to start blaming people and organizations at this point is highly premature. I think that we need to find out just exactly how bad this situation is and deal with it. The idea of starting to cast blame within hours of something having happened is in fact unseemly.
And Ambassador Holbrooke, does the United States in a situation like this go it alone, or does it gather the international community together as one, or as much of one as it can, and try and respond in that form?
Well, first of all, let me say that at this moment, we have to find out what happened down there. I used to work in that building and was there when it was attacked a few years ago. I know that area. My assistant has a cousin who's now missing in the building, and my thoughts are first for the enormous, unbelievable loss of life and tragedy that's going on in Lower Manhattan. Beyond that, Aaron, on your question, this requires a unified international response by all the key member states of the world community, including, very importantly, Russia. And as for the interview you just broadcast by the foreign minister from the Taliban, let's be clear on his attempts to disassociate himself from Osama bin Laden. We don't know at this point who did this, but it was well coordinated and done with a degree of skill which exceeds anything. I think Bob Gates will know better than me, but I think, Bob, this is the most skillful, murderous attack ever in terms of coordination. And I want to be very clear on this. Bin Laden himself, as you just suggested, Bin Laden has said that the Taliban leader, Mullah Muhammad Omar, is the true spiritual leader of the Muslim world. He said that Afghanistan is the purified Islamic State equivalent to Mecca and Medina. And in a tape that the New York Times wrote about 2 days ago, he urged Muslims everywhere, and I'm quoting the New York Times, to migrate to Afghanistan to support the Taliban, saying it's their duty to God, and saying there's now finally a Muslim state that destroys falsehoods and does not succumb to the American infidel and is led by the true believer, Mullah Muhammad Omar, and so on and so forth. So what I want to stress here is that any nation, and this goes for the Taliban and their henchmen in Afghanistan, any nation in the world that harbored anyone associated with this must be treated as though they were part of what is effectively an act of war against the United States. And they cannot hide behind the traditional definitions of difficulty. In the past, we've tried to get Osama bin Laden. He's evaded capture. He almost got killed by a bombing raid 2 or 3 years ago. And I think starting with Afghanistan, we're going to have to hold everyone accountable on the who might have sheltered anyone associated with this act.
So we don't simply, in this conversation, we don't simply hold the group itself, whoever it is, the group itself accountable. We hold anyone accountable, any country, any government accountable if they did nothing to stop it.
Any country which shelters, abates, or helps these people and their cohorts evade capture and the retribution they deserve is, in my view, functionally culpable of the events that took place in New York and Washington and elsewhere today, and must be so warned. I'm not accusing the Taliban specifically at this point because we don't know who did it.
Correct.
But all the evidence points to a connection between Osama bin Laden and Taliban leaders, and an attempt on the Taliban's part to, as the New York Times put it 2 days before this attack, call it as a ploy. And that is a quote from the New York Times before this happened. So I just want to underscore again, we are going to need the support of all our allies in Europe, the Russians, the Chinese, and any other country that might have in the past flirted with playing both sides of the street. Nothing like this has happened in American history. The full dimensions of it are still not clear to anyone, but I think we all can imagine it's going to be heart-wrenching in its dimensions as it becomes fully apparent, and we're not going to be able to leave countries playing two sides here. And I'm sure my friend Bob Gates would not disagree with that.
Let me, Mr. Gates, I want to come back to you. Mr. Holbrook, stay with us for a minute. I believe now we have the President. This is the President on tape a few moments ago. Well, obviously we're having a technical problem. Let me just tell you what, again, the President said in what has been his second statement. His first statement came after the first attacks here in New York. Short time ago, the President said, "We have taken all appropriate security precautions to protect the American people." He added, "We make no mistake," said the President, "the United States will hunt down and punish those responsible." I think we're going to try and hear the President again. Here we go. Yeah. This is coming to us from the broadcast pool. It's traveling with the President. Obviously, it's a very chaotic day. As you can imagine, a horrible tragedy has taken place. And people are working very hard to get stuff done and get it done right. And obviously the pool is having trouble feeding the tape. But again, the President said, make no mistake, the United States will hunt down and punish those responsible for these cowardly acts. Cowardly acts, I think it's fair to say we don't quite have our arms around the magnitude of it all.
I want to reassure the American people that the full resources of the federal government are working to assist local authorities to save lives and to help the victims of these attacks. Make no mistake, the United States will hunt down and punish those responsible for these cowardly acts. I've been in regular contact with the Vice President, Secretary of Defense, the National Security Team, and my cabinet. We have taken all appropriate security precautions to protect the American people. Our military at home and around the world is on high alert status, and we have taken the necessary security precautions to continue the functions of your government. We have been in touch with the leaders of Congress and with world leaders to assure them that we will do whatever is necessary to protect America and Americans. I ask the American people to join me in saying a thanks for all the folks who have been fighting hard to rescue our fellow citizens, and to join me in saying a prayer for the victims and their families. The resolve of our great nation is being tested, but make no mistake, we will show the world that we will pass this test. God bless.
President Bush, a short time ago, in his second remarks of the day, the President initially was headed back to the White House, and a security decision was made to divert the flight. And so the President will not go back to Washington, at least not yet. When he will return, perhaps John King can tell us. Our senior White House correspondent joins us now. John? John, are you there?
Yes, I am, Aaron. Can you hear me?
Yes, I do. I hear you fine. Do you have any word on when the President will come back?
No, we do not. As you reported, we were told earlier in the day the #1 priority was the President's safety. The #2 priority was to get him back to the White House because they believe that would send a powerful political statement. But as the President was on his way back from Florida, We are told by sources a security decision was made that at this time not to bring him back to Washington, so he was brought, and we won't disclose his exact location for security reasons, he was brought to one of several military installations in the United States that is equipped, we are told, with a very sophisticated command and control bunker, very much like the equipment that would be available to the President here at the White House in the White House Situation Room. We are also told that national security team members are still in the White House Situation Room, and earlier today, at least as of a little more than an hour ago, Vice President Cheney as well, directing operations and monitoring things from there. But the President obviously deciding not to come directly back to Washington. We are told that is for security reasons, delivering the statement you just heard. He has been in touch with congressional leaders, and we are told leadership members of the U.S. Congress are also being taken to an undisclosed location for their security. So we're trying to get more information on that, and we will bring that to you as soon as we have it. Aaron?
John, thanks. Senior White House correspondent John King. Peter Bergen, CNN's Peter Bergen has been tracking the government of Afghanistan for some time, and he was listening in a few moments ago when the Taliban spokesman was speaking. Peter, first of all, what did you hear? Was there anything that perhaps the rest of us might not have heard, any nuance in what you heard? Why don't you start there?
Well, we just heard from the Foreign Minister, Wakil Mutawakil, who's, relatively speaking, a moderate of the Taliban movement. He basically repeated what I think is a standard Taliban line we've heard for the past at least couple of years, which is that Osama bin Laden isn't a terrorist and that he's being contained by the Taliban and that he's not able to conduct political or military missions. This, unfortunately, is really a false statement since Osama bin Laden has been fingered by both Yemeni and U.S. authorities for the bombing of the USS Cole in Yemen in October 2000. There isn't an indictment there yet. The FBI continues to investigate, but senior Yemeni officials and senior U.S. officials have said that he's the primary suspect. So we've seen that bin Laden was able to bomb 2 U.S. embassies in Africa in '98 within 9 minutes of each other. We've seen that bin Laden was able to blow a huge hole in the side of one of the most sophisticated warships in the U.S. Navy, the USS Cole in Yemen in October of last year. And unfortunately, he must be top of the list of the person sophisticated enough in terms of operations to bring off these kinds of terrible disasters we've seen today. If you're looking for who is the most likely suspect, he has to be it. You've got an operation in which several people appear to commit suicide. You've also got an operation in which people obviously had some skill in piloting planes. These are clearly attributes of his organization. We know that he has pilots in his organization. We've seen in several instances that his members of his organization commit suicide in attacks. We've also seen a pattern of warnings in previous bin Laden attacks in which this fits. 9 weeks before the U.S. embassy bombings in Africa in August of '98, bin Laden held a press conference in Afghanistan talking about, quote, good news in coming weeks. A few months before the USS Cole was bombed in Yemen, a videotape circulated around the Middle East in which bin Laden was wearing a Yemeni dagger, which he's never done in previous photographs, and one of his number 2 called for attacks on U.S. targets in Yemen. Just recently there's been a videotape floating around the Middle East in which bin Laden, a very confident bin Laden, calls for attacks on the United States, says that the victory of Yemen, referring to the USS Cole attack, will continue. People that I've talked to are familiar with the bin Laden organization, said that the threats on this tape were very serious. That there was an imminent attack in the works. I spoke to somebody who was familiar with the organization a few weeks ago who made those statements to me. I had been very concerned about a potential attack as a result of this tape. It fits with the modus operandi, which is to talk about potential attacks coming up relatively soon without being particularly specific.
Peter, let me just interrupt you for a second. Our senior analyst, Jeff Greenfield, is here, and Jeff has a question. Jeff, go ahead.
Hi, Peter. If I'm not mistaken, you actually interviewed Osama bin Laden some years ago, correct?
Yeah, in '97 for CNN.
Now, at that time, what did he say about the notion of targeting civilians? I mean, what is the rationale behind targeting civilians for death and destruction?
Well, at that time, Jeff, he told us that because of the American military presence in the Middle East, that he was calling for attacks on U.S. soldiers. Now, he said if American civilians got in the way, that was sort of their problem. So at that time in '97, he was really only calling for attacks on American military targets. Later, that position evolved. By '98, he was calling for attacks on all Americans, whether civilian or military. I think the rationale behind that thinking is that, in his view, if you're an American taxpayer, you're subsidizing the anti-Islamic, quote, activities that he's against, whether that's in Saudi Arabia, with the American military presence there, or with America's support for Israel in the ongoing intifada. Jeff.
Peter, thank you for your work today. I suspect we'll get back to you, but we appreciate the background, which I think gives us some context for why the focus is again on bin Laden. But we should add that as we talk to you now, we can't be certain. We do not know that that's who is behind what has happened. What we do know is an extraordinary national tragedy has taken place, that someone is responsible, that the American government has promised to hunt down and punish, the president's words a short time ago, hunt down and punish whoever is responsible.
Do we have Director Gates still on the phone?
No, I don't believe
I guess we do not. Because the question, obviously we've already heard it with General Clark and at least one of the congressmen asking the question, how can an agency with an estimated budget of $26.5 billion a year not have known this? I think that's the first of many such questions we're going to be hearing.
Sandy Berger, who worked national security in the Clinton administration, and Richard Holbrooke, the former UN ambassador, back on the phone with us. Mr. Berger, give me a sense of what is going on in Washington right now. Who are the players at the table? Where is the table? And what are they doing?
Well, obviously the President of the United States is at the head of the table no matter where he is. But others around that table include the Secretary of Defense and Attorney General, head of the FBI, the National Security Advisor, Secretary of State, because this may obviously involve international matters. I think we, in the midst of our outrage and indignation, we have to stay focused and stay determined here. The first job in this situation is rescue and to deal with what must be thousands of people here who are in peril. This is, in the first instance, a massive rescue operation. In the second instance, it's a security operation. We don't know what else may be part of this multifaceted operation. A number of precautions have been taken in the last few hours, and we have to obviously lock down as much as we can. And then the focus becomes detection. And I think that given the magnitude of this, given the fact that this has obviously involved multiple points of origin in the United States, it is inconceivable to me that we will not know relatively quickly when the dust settles who is responsible for this.
Now, Mr. Holbrooke, Ambassador Holbrooke, what has happened today is extraordinary. Give it a kind of historical context, the enormity of what's taken place.
Well, I think your coverage has made it more clear than anything else, although despite the superb efforts you've made, it hasn't yet become fully evident to your viewers what would be evident to any of us like myself who worked in the World Trade Center. I was there in the last bombing, as I mentioned earlier. That the number of people in that area, including the Chambers Street subway stop, which goes right under the World Trade Center, means that the dimensions of it exceed by a factor of probably 100 any previous incident, including Oklahoma City and the previous World Trade Center in American history. And one must be ready for news that will be very, very grim indeed for all of us as individuals who will have friends and relatives there, and for all Americans. And there will be additional consequences. This is the financial center of the world. The buildings in that area, all of which have now been evacuated, whose infrastructures may be threatened by gas and electrical line degradation, could affect, at least temporarily, the financial markets as well, although I would leave that to Treasury, and Sandy Berger listed the people at the table. I'm not sure if Sandy mentioned the Treasury Secretary, but I'm sure the Treasury and the Fed are well aware of the implications of orderly movement and capital transfers. Now, looking beyond that, Aaron, I think we have to go back to the fact that everyone has talked about the possibility of this kind of thing for a long time, and we faced lesser but similar attempts. This exceeded, apparently, the expectations of the intelligence experts, and we will learn more about that in the weeks to come. But I need to underscore one point. To find the people responsible is going to take a unified international effort. No one nation, not even the United States, can do it on its own. And we must have the full cooperation of the Russians, of the states in the Middle East, because I think the assumption that that's the region where this was planned is pretty solid. And I repeat this again, any nation that is seen to have harbored or abetted or sheltered any of these people must be treated as co-equally responsible. They cannot hide behind the facade we just saw in the remarks of the Taliban foreign minister. And Peter Bergen's extraordinarily insightful explanation a few minutes ago on CNN, I think, is the first real glimpse into that the viewers have had into how dangerous this is. If the Taliban shelters Osama bin Laden, as they do, and if Osama bin Laden is responsible for this, as I think almost everyone is going to suspect, then the Taliban must be held equally responsible for what has happened today.
Jeff?
And Ambassador Holbrooke, what can, I would like you to be specific. What does that mean? Are you talking about a retaliatory strike against Afghanistan?
Yeah, that's Jeff.
It's Jeff Greenfield. I'm sorry,
Hi, Jeff. No.
Is that what you mean? That if put the links together?
No, Jeff. Let me be very frank, and I don't want to lapse into bloody-minded verbal excesses at a moment of high emotion. But let's be very blunt about this. If a country or regime, the Taliban, or some other regime to be determined by the intelligence community, has sheltered people who played a role in this, they cannot hide behind the attributes of they didn't know it, they had nothing to do with it. They must cooperate in the pursuit of the people responsible. And since the Taliban leader has been publicly proclaimed by Osama bin Laden as the present spiritual leader of the Muslim world, I'm referring to bin Laden's declaration that Mullah Muhammad Omar is the rightful leader of the spiritual leader of the Muslim world, something he said on tape, quoted by John Burns in the New York Times 2 days ago. And if, in fact, these people are in some degree of collusion, I personally believe, and I'm only speaking for myself here, I personally believe that the Taliban should be regarded as co-equally responsible for this, and therefore, if and when we consider military action, it is fully justified, and the Taliban should face the same consequences.
Ambassador, thank you. Just quickly, if we can, one last question to Sandy Berger. When you were at the table, in honesty, did you ever anticipate the magnitude, an attack of this magnitude, which has taken place, just to remind people, not just in this city, in New York, not just in the capital, Washington, but on a number of airliners flying across the country as well? Was the planning that broad, with the fear that great?
Well, I think for some time we have known that we are vulnerable to a serious attack. A multiple attack was thwarted, as you recall, during the Millennium New Year. But I think this, certainly exceeds in scope anything that intelligence community anticipated, and is, as I said, an extraordinarily sophisticated operation to carry out something like this from various sites in the United States relatively simultaneously without detection. Whoever has perpetrated this has declared war on the United States, and we will have to respond accordingly. But I would also caution here that we should be careful about jumping to certitude about what happened here. We'll know this soon enough, and we'll also be able to find out why this was not detected.
I think that's just an extraordinarily important point, that what is going on right now at this moment is more important than why it happened. And what is going on is you have thousands of people, we presume in a number of different places, whose lives are at risk, who have been hurt, who need to be rescued, who need to be treated, who need to be taken to hospitals. In New York, in northern New Jersey, where the bulk of the injured are being treated here, there is a critical shortage of blood. Hospital officials are desperately seeking help there. And as Mr. Berger said, time enough later to figure out who and how we deal with it. Ambassador Holbrooke, Sandy Berger, thank you both for joining us. William Rodriguez, I just was looking down. There are literally down below us by Madison Square Garden, which is where we're located, hundreds, perhaps thousands of people on the corner, and they are just looking out. And from where they are, they can't see very much but the smoke. And I can't tell you if something has happened, and it's lunch hour here, and there's just a lot of people, as there have been all morning, looking at a street that is almost empty. As New York, the southern part of New York, Penn Station by the Garden, essentially being evacuated to allow emergency crews to get to the scene. William Rodriguez is a maintenance worker at the Trade Center, I believe. In any case, he's on the phone with us now. Mr. Rodriguez, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you clearly.
Tell me where you were when, well, which of the two buildings were you in?
I work on the building 1, the one that got hit the first time.
Tell me what happened.
I was on the basement, which is a support floor for the maintenance company, and we hear like a big rumble, not like an impact, like a rumble, like something like moving furniture on a massive way, and all of a sudden we hear another rumble, and a guy comes running into our office, and all his skin was off his body. All his skin, we went crazy, we started screaming, we told him to get out. We took everybody out of the office outside to the loading dock area, and then I went back in, and when I went back in, I saw people, I heard people that were stuck on an elevator, on a freight elevator, because all the elevators went down, and water was going in, and they were probably getting drowned, and we get a couple of pipes and opened the elevator, and we got the people out. I went back up, and I saw one of the officers from the Port Authority Police. I've been working there for 20 years, so I knew him very well. My routine on the World Trade Center is in charge of the staircase. And since there was no elevator service, I have the master key for all the staircase doors. So I went up with a police officer and a group of firemen. As we went up, there was a lot of people coming down. And while we got, it was very difficult to get up.
Mr. Rodriguez, how much time has elapsed here in this, as you recount the events? Did it seem like hours, minutes, seconds?
No, it wasn't hours.
But what did it seem like?
Well, there was a big time, like a gap. There was a gap of time. I won't be able to tell you if it was 15, 20 minutes, but it was a gap of time. We heard while we were on the 33rd floor, I'm sorry, on the 27th floor, because we stopped there with the fire department because the equipment was very heavy and they were breathing very hard. They took a break because they couldn't continue going up, so they wanted to take a break.
Yeah.
And we have a person on a wheelchair that we were going to bring down on a gurney, and a lady that was having a problem with a heart attack, and some other guy that was breathing hardly. And we went a couple of floors up while they were putting the person in the gurney. got up to the 39th floor, and we heard on the radio that the 65th floor collapsed.
All right,
Heard it collapsed.
Mr. Rodriguez, let me stop you there at the 65th floor. And let me add, you're a lucky man, it seems like today. Thank you for joining us. Matt Cornelius, you were on the 64th floor, 65th floor?
65th floor. Yeah, that's where I work.
Tell me what happened.
Well, I arrived at work a little bit early today.
What do you do?
And I work for the Port Authority in the aviation department. And I was just putting my stuff away, and all of a sudden we heard a loud crash. And the building started shaking, kind of moving like a wave.
What did you think was happening?
I had no idea. I mean, we figured either an airplane had hit it, or our first instinct was airplane. And everyone started screaming and said, you know, move away from the windows and let's get out of here. And we saw debris fall past the window on the north side.
How much, just to help our viewers kind of orient themselves, you're on the 65th floor of a building that is how many stories?
I believe it's 110.
So 50 stories above you, this has taken place.
I imagine so.
Okay.
We really had no idea at all what had happened until we exited the building. I mean, I had no idea the magnitude. Just took the stairs. I believe I actually was in the stairs as that same man, because I remember I saw the person in the wheelchair. We made it pretty fast down to 40th floor, and then from there the smoke got a little bit thick, and it was a lot slower. We maybe made a floor about every 2 minutes.
And how many people are in this group with you?
Well, there was just one other person that I worked with that was with us. It was packed. I mean, it was a virtual traffic jam in the staircase, up and down, I guess. It was very full.
People screaming?
No, actually everyone maintained calm really well. I was impressed with that. I think for some people it brought back memories of the bombing. People had been there before when that happened. But I was amazed, really. We got in the stairway, we were moving down. When the fire department were coming up, they'd say, you know, move to left. Everyone moved to left, and everyone complied. You know, a couple of people started crying a little bit, but you know, we said we're going to get out of here. We just got to focus and take it one step at a time.
Was it noisy, or was there screaming?
No, it
was it quiet? Was it eerie?
It wasn't. I mean, it wasn't quiet. I mean, people were talking. In fact, someone was laughing. I kept hearing that, and I thought that was strange. But it was pretty normal. I mean, it wasn't. We didn't know what was going on. I mean, all we knew was something major had happened. Exactly, but we didn't really understand the full severity of the situation. So people weren't panicking. Once we got down to they put us on the plaza level, which was disturbing because there was a lot of debris in the plaza level and a lot of carnage, basically. We then moved out the back towards Broadway, and when they said, the police were saying, don't look back, don't look back. And of course, I made it about half a block, and I looked back, and I saw the other tower on fire, and I couldn't believe it. And
were you terrified?
Yeah. When we were stuck in that stairway, I mean, we stopped every now and then. It started to get nervous, but we never had any fear of the building collapse. I mean, we had no idea what was going on. So once I got out, and it's still sinking in the real full severity of it. I mean, it's just an awful thing.
That's true of everybody.
Yep. So
lucky man.
I am very lucky. I thank God very much.
That's all you might. Thank you.
Okay, no problem.
Very much. Thank you. In Washington, D.C., thank you, Matt. Yep. They have declared a state of emergency. Do we have a guest there, or? Okay. Washington has declared Washington, D.C. a state of emergency. I believe I was just told that the Space Needle in Seattle has been closed down. Is that correct? Did I hear you guys? There are a couple of points we might make there. Back in the year 2000, just before New Year's Eve, coming into Washington State, a man was stopped with explosives, and as it turned out, that was a part of a planned terrorist attack, and it caused the city of Seattle to shut down what had been an enormously elaborate Millennium celebration. They are very much on edge in Seattle. We were just there last week, and it's not surprising to me that they would shut that building down. Elise Marcos is an official with New York City Hospitals, and she joins us. He joins us now. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I hear you okay.
I apologize for the stuttered introduction. Tell me the situation in the hospitals.
Well, at Bellevue Hospital, which is the largest public hospital in the city, and is relatively near the incident, we have, as of now, received approximately 125, 30 patients. 2 are dead, unfortunately. Some have brain injuries, very serious fractures. And we are now getting more patients from other hospitals that need microsurgery or implantation of limbs and plastic surgery. So it is a rather overwhelming situation here.
Mr. Marcos,
yes.
Mr. Marcos, you were outside the buildings in that period between the planes hitting and the buildings collapsing. Can you tell me what you saw?
Well, as president of the public hospitals, I was asked immediately within seconds to join the crisis assistance unit, which is located across the street from the World Trade Center. So I drove there, and as I was parking, a huge piece of rock hit the back of the car, broke the windshield where I was sitting, so I'm very lucky to be alive. Then when I went to the center was evacuated because they were afraid that a second plane may be coming. I joined the fire commissioner, and then I needed to use the telephone because cellular phones were not working. I went into, I think, American Express building, and as I was there, one of the buildings collapsed, and we were unable to leave that building, and thanks to a very brave police officer who was able to find an exit, we are here today.
Mr. Marcos, we heard reports that people were jumping out of the building. Did you see that?
Unfortunately, I saw about 5 people jumping from up the building, and I can tell you there's no other, I've never had such an overwhelming and terrible experience in my life, although I've been in this job for a long time and I've seen a lot of things. It's